Hello, hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is your girl Mitzi, and this is Mitzi. Let's think about it. Today, we are thinking about children's mental health, ladies and gentlemen. That is the topic because that is a thinker. So, luckily for me, I have Dr. John here who's going to help us think about this in a whole new light. So, with that being said, thank you so much, Dr. John, for coming on to my show, sharing your time and your perspective with me. I'm truly blessed to have you on my show to talk about this. So, let's dive right in. When you hear the words children's mental health, what does that make you think about?
The real pandemic.
I'm
That's the
sorry,
real
say that.
that's the real pandemic, mental health. It's not a virus. It's not a bit of virus. It's what our kids are struggling with right now, the real crisis, the real pandemic is mental health. Particularly since the lockdowns of 2020. Since the lockdowns of 2020, we've seen a 70% increase in teenage suicide attempts. We have seen child depression, anxiety, obesity, addictions, all at a all-time high. And our children are very much struggling, and many people don't recognize that this is what we're struggling with right now.
Oh, absolutely. I do think that this is something that has been going on for years, centuries, decades. And I feel like it's a sad thing because a lot of the times parents just say, oh, you're too young to even have that type of problems. I mean, what does that make you think about when you hear that type of statement coming from an adult to a child?
Uh, they're not informed. I think back to April of 2020, and I was being interviewed by a major news network, and they're asking me, what's it going to be like for these kids in foster care in particular who are going to be not going to school? And my statement at the time was, I'm far more concerned about the mental health than I am of any virus. And what we did when you have 5 million children who experience domestic violence in their house every single day, what we did was we locked them at home with their abuser. We locked them at home with their abuser in 2020, thinking this is in the best interest of the children. They're going to be safe. Absolutely not. We locked them at home with their abuser with no mandated reporter. Of course, mental health just escalated. And then this little device right here, this little phone right here, too, is a place where children are really in danger. There's a lot of sexual predators out there who lure these children in with false hopes and false promises. Again, making them at risk of not only just mental health, but child sex trafficking and a life of danger, if you will.
Oh, absolutely. I absolutely agree with that because when I was growing up, my house was very unstable. And I remember being in my really young and telling my mom, oh, I think I have depression. I think I'm just sad all the time. And then she's like, yeah, you don't have that. Wait till you get older and then you can really experience sadness. And I think it's right what you were saying, how when you put your child in a predicament or when you put a child in a predicament where they can't escape from, I mean, it really burdens their mind. I mean, sometimes school is their freedom, when you get
Yes.
older, work becomes your freedom. And when you have to leave your home to finally get some peace of mind. So that pandemic mindset of just forcing them in a home with the abuser, with the tauntingness, with the constant turmoil that a child deals with, I think it's very stressful. So what is something that children can do that's something that their parents don't teach them? I mean, how can they self heal their mental health, or is that even a thing?
Well, a lot of children need guidance in that area because they may not recognize that they're suffering from it. They may think that they are all by themselves. They might think that
Yeah.
nobody else understands them. So they've got to have that guidance. But as parents, we have to set healthy guidelines or boundaries for them. In my home, we don't even begin to talk about having a cell phone in our house until you're at least ninth grade. And that means we're just going to talk about it. That doesn't mean you're going to get it, but that's when we'll start the discussion. The frontal cortex is not fully developed in a human being until at least 25 years of age. So how can a first grader, second grader, third grader, or fifth grader, sixth grader navigate the many, many risks and dangers on social media when their brain's not fully developed yet? So we got to set healthy boundaries, make sure that the children are engaged in healthy activities. We're also in a society today in our nation where there's a lot of our children are at risk of obesity as well.
Yeah.
Because again, they're spending too much time in front of screens, so they're not getting outside to get healthy exercise. So that's one thing as parents we need to do is we need to just tell our kids, hey, go explore the world outside. Of course, protecting the children, make sure they're safe.
Yeah.
But there's a number of things as parents that we have to do to help our children navigate those risks. And if we're leaving up to the child themselves, I don't think the child's going to be able to really navigate those risks because they may be too young or too immature, or they may have been too abused to recognize those dangers. Again, they probably think I'm all alone. No one understands me. When in
Yeah.
fact, so they're not alone by far.
Absolutely. I think that's one thing for sure is that having that guidance and proper guidance for children is the best way. And I think as adults, when we interact with any children out in the world, we give them that hope that they're seeing, they're heard, and they're valued because we don't know in their circumstances if they're not heard, they're not seen, and they're not valued. So I believe that when an adult outside of their home is able to bestow that on a child, I think that's a very good green flag. You know what I mean? A green flag for the adults to really help these children. I mean, but I guess for those adults who are constantly on the go, 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 and who don't necessarily have abuse or anything, you know what I mean, those domestic violence in their home, but they're just constantly busy and they don't have time for their children. How do they necessarily see the decline in a child that's possibly having mental health issues?
Well, to begin with, they've got to set their priorities. Is work their
Yeah.
priority or is their child their priority?
Mm.
Um, you know, uh, I recognized a long time ago that yeah, as a foster parent myself to over 60 plus children, um, there's not a day that goes by that I am an example for my children. I am a role model for my children, and I'm giving my children what they need most, and that is love. So many
Mm.
children are not experiencing that today because their parents might be too busy, if you will. Um, you make choices. You make choices as a parent. Is my priority going to be my work, or is my priority going to be my child? Because at the end of the day, you still might have that work, you still might have that job, but the child's moved out of your house. They've
Yeah.
graduated from high school, they're gone, and you didn't get to spend the time that you wanted with them. And so again, it's a priorities, if you will.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think as adults we need to recognize our priorities and find balance because if we don't find balance, then we don't allow our children to be seen, we don't allow our children to be heard, and then we don't show our children that balance is necessary and we don't show children our balance that balance is actually obtainable in our lives, you know, and it comes also down to values and morals, you know what I mean, because I
Yeah,
think the values and morals that us as adults have and we can bestow that on our children is another thing that is a gift that's free, you know what I mean, you don't have to spend any money on that, you don't have
right.
to spend any money on the values, we don't have to spend any money on the morals, we just have to spend the time and actually the sincere love. And I don't think parents understand that concept, you know, because they're chasing the race of the world, but they're not realizing, okay, what are you going to do with this child that has to go into this world? How are you going to teach them to deal with this? How are you going to teach them to manage this? And I don't think a lot of adults understand the concept that like how we live our lives really does affect our children's lives. So, do you believe that practicing affirmations with children is a good step?
Daily has to be done daily. Children need to hear. I've written several articles about it. Children need to hear 5 things every day, and one of them is "I love you," because they're not getting that from their family, not getting that from their parents, because the parents are too busy with work or whatever it might be. Then the children are going to seek it elsewhere. They're going to go
Yeah.
online seeking it elsewhere. And that's why human trafficking is such, I hate to say it, big business. It's the number one human trafficking is the number one global business because
Yeah.
for many children, they're going online looking for something they're not getting in the home from their parents. Affirmation, time, love. So yes, children need to be affirmed every single day that they are valued, that they matter, that they are loved, they're important, that they're a priority. Because again, if
Yeah.
they don't get it, they will look for it someplace else. And many times that's
Absolutely.
going to be a dangerous place.
It is. It is a very dangerous place because somebody can misconstrue someone else's kindness as, oh, okay, they're being kind, but in reality, that person could have a malintent in behind their mindset. So it's just like we have to be able to provide that and show them the right and wrong so that they can all go into this world with that with that discernment. And I don't think adults have that discernment, but I think it also comes down to when you were a child, you never had that guidance. So as an adult, you still don't have that guidance. In your perspective, do you think that happens as well?
Oh, to be sure. To be sure, as a foster parent, I've had so many kids come through my home where it's generational. It's
Mm,
generational. That's why I said earlier, I recognize that I am a role model for my children. Everything I say, everything I do, they're learning from the
yeah,
good and the bad. So I got to be very cognizant of that, very conscious of that. Um, but yeah, but there are many kids who are in homes where their parents never were parented. Their parents were never cared for. And those parents might be suffering from their own mental health issues, from their own anxiety, from their own trauma because they never got help. And yet they're trying to raise a child, but they're still suffering from their own depression, trauma, etc. So
mhm.
again, it's just generational for
It's a
so many
cycle.
kids, and we're seeing more and more of that right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a cycle that doesn't seem like it ends until somebody recognizes what's happening and then
Right.
they break it. So it seems like that's exactly what you're doing when you get these foster children who come into your life. You recognize that the best way to cure that is by love, time, guidance, affirmation. I mean, those are really great steps. I mean, what does a parent do when a child is self-isolating themselves? How do you necessarily handle that?
Well, that should be a warning sign.
Mm.
That should be a warning sign. You need to recognize those warning signs. And if that's happening, then you gotta quickly make that a priority, correct that. You've got to engage yourself with a child, learn what their interests are, learn what their hobbies are, ask them to participate with you. In our house, our kids are helping us. They're side by side with us cooking, learning how to cook, learning how to garden. We're outside with them playing, swimming in the pool, taking them on vacations. And we limit their screen time because if they are self-isolating, they're probably in their bedroom on a device where no one is monitoring, no one is supervising. And people often say to me, Dr. John, I don't want to invade my child's privacy in social media. And I say, you're not invading their privacy, you're protecting the child. You're
Yeah.
protecting the child because if we don't know who they're contacting when they are isolated in their bedroom,
Yeah.
that could be a very grave danger.
Exactly. And I think that's something that as adults we just need to remember that protection is real. You know what I mean? It oversides anything else that may be in a delusion that we're trying to allow, the experience or whatever. But at the end of the day, when we have to protect our child, it's real. You know what I mean? We have to protect their mental state. We have to protect their heart. We have to protect who they're going to be as an adult because like we were talking about earlier, what happens as a children affects them as in adulthood. So do you think the comparison game is a really bad processing that happens in children? And how do you rebuttal that? Like how do you deal with that in your own home?
Could you repeat that question again, please? I'm sorry.
Yes, about comparison. Like, how do you battle comparison? Because comparison, you can fall into these traps, and especially as children, I mean, that comparison game, constantly comparing yourself to somebody else. I mean, how do you necessarily deal with that?
Well, we celebrate each child's strengths. We celebrate each because we all have our own strengths. We all have our own weaknesses, but we all have our own strengths and we lift them up. Whether the child is really good at drawing or singing, or maybe they're really good at cleaning, maybe they're really good with pets. We zero in on their strengths and we celebrate it and praise them for that and ask them, to teach us those. Like for example, when we have a child who all of the kids in our home have had some type of chores and responsibilities. I think it teaches them a lot of great skills. So we might say something like, every time you feed the cat's so happy to see you. You must be that cat's best friend. That cat must love you. Can you tell me what are you doing? Why does the cat love you so much? Show me that. Or wow, this you made this kitchen look incredible. Can you show me how you did it? So things like that.
Yeah, most definitely lifting them up is a nice way because then it gets them away from thinking about, oh, I'm so bad, I'm so bad, I'm so bad. But no, you're not bad. It's just a
No.
bad situation that happened. You know what I mean? Or it was just a bad moment, but the day is still great. There's still so much to learn and to achieve. So yes, I think that's a great way to just start to refocus the children's mindset. And I know we were talking about some of the warning signs to know that a child's mental health is declining with, you know, isolation, but what other warning signs can you share with us that you have experienced or know of?
Well, self-isolation might be one. You touched on that one there. Sudden change in friends, sudden change in diet or dress. Um, Again, spending too much time on devices, not wanting to participate in other activities. Cutting is a big
Self-harm.
one, right? You got to be look or self-harm. And unfortunately, we live in a society today where many kids do that. As I said earlier, 70% increase in teenage suicide attempts since the lockdowns in 2020. So it's there. We just have to make sure we recognize the signs and take immediate action. As I said a few moments ago, I think there's five things a child needs to hear every single day. And one of them is I love you. One of them is I'm thankful for you. One of them is I'm proud of you. One of them is I'm sorry. So when I make a mistake as a parent, I need to quickly let my child know that I was wrong. I apologize. Would you please forgive me? Because again, we're modeling that for our children. We're telling our children it's okay to admit that you made a mistake. It's okay to admit that you're wrong. I am a parent. I'm also human, and I'm going to make mistakes, but I'm going to learn from that as well. So
Yeah.
again, it's constant supervision. It's constant praise, and it's constant parenting. Again, so many kids don't get that today.
Yeah, they really don't. They don't get that parenting. They don't understand what exactly is a parent because nowadays it seems like parents just wants to be their friend. And I just like what
Yes, and they want to
I
be their
mean, what
friend,
is yeah, what is your opinion on that?
or they don't want to hurt their child's feelings. Well,
Yeah.
you know, um, I'm glad my parents told me no many, many
Mhm.
times. Um,
Yeah.
because as a teenage boy, I was going to do a lot of foolish things. They're probably going to give me a lot of trouble or a lot of pain. But I'm glad I was grounded by my parents, grounded as in um, centered. But at the same time, hey, there were consequences to our actions, and we teach our kids the same thing in our house. No means no. There are consequences to your choices. Every single choice you make, there's going to be a consequence, whether it's a positive consequence or a negative consequence, and we're going to learn from those consequences, and we still love you. You made this
Yeah.
choice. I love you. Here's the consequence, and I love you, you know.
Yeah.
Um, so they have
Yeah.
to, children, a lot of kids, they don't have boundaries and as you mentioned, their parents want to be their friends. Well, I'll be my child's friends when they're moved out of the house and they're an adult. But when they're a child in the home, they're non-adult. I'm the
Absolutely.
parent, they are the child, and it's my role as a parent to protect them, to teach them, to instruct them, to guide them, to love them, not to be their friend. I can have fun with them. Of course, I'm going to have fun with them, and we have a lot of fun. But there's also a separation of we're not equals. Again, when
Yes. Thank
are
you.
yes, we're not.
Mm.
My oldest daughter is 28. She is my friend. She's also my daughter. But we have a much different relationship when she's 28 than when she was 8 or when she was
Yeah.
18.
Absolutely. I'm glad that you said that. And I think that that needs to be said over and over. So if anybody listening, go back and rewind and repeat, because goodness, that is something that us as adults need to remember that we are not a child's equal. Like it doesn't work like that. We don't think as a child, we don't operate as a child. So we will never be as equal as a child. So we cannot put our child into that aspect. So I guess it gets to my next question. So how do you feel when you find out that that children are the ones that are parenting the parent? How does that make you feel? And what does that make you think about?
That leaves me a lot of questions, and it frightens me because there's
Yeah,
yeah, it as a again parent of 60 plus kids from foster care, I know a lot of it starts in the home and a lot of it's environment. So if a child is, and I've seen that, I've had those kids come through my home who have been the parents, and that's a responsibility a child should not have at all because
yeah,
they're not able to begin with, they're not able to enjoy their childhood. And they have to if they're going to grow in a healthy fashion. They don't need the
yeah,
responsibilities of paying bills. They don't need the responsibilities of making those tough decisions. And again, I have had those kids in my home, and oftentimes they're riddled with guilt. They're riddled with guilt because they feel that they let their family down. For example, we had a sibling group of five kids, and the 13-year-old one was responsible for getting his siblings fed and clothed and to school every single day. His responsibility was being the lookout for the police. His responsibility was being paying the family bills while his mom ran a meth lab in the house with her two boyfriends. And when those kids came to us, the 13-year-old felt he let his entire family down.
ooh,
And because he was in charge of everything. He wasn't allowed to be a kid. He was not allowed to be a
Yeah.
child. So when he went to school, he was tremendously bright. But when he went to school, all of the stress of being that parental figure, he released it at school and he was in fights all the time because he was releasing a lot of his tension, his stress, his anxiety.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. So do you think like extracurricular activities like putting children into like kickboxing or karate or arts or anything like that or music, do you think that's a good way to release like energy that's built up into a child?
I'm a firm believer of music therapy, art therapy, play therapy, pet therapy. I love all those forms of therapy that we can do in our own home. Yes, to be sure. Yes, yes, yes. Um,
Absolutely.
all of our kids um, participate in sports. They participate in extracurricular activities outside of school. I just had two that came back from summer camp. Yeah, we're always looking for opportunities for them to grow and to learn new skills, to meet new people in a healthy, safe environment, and to learn more about themselves as well.
Yeah, that's a nice point. And I guess that leads me to my next question. Do you think coddling your child or being overbearing and overprotective of a child, can that affect a child's mental health? And if so, how so?
Yes. Yes, because if a child hears no, 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 no all the time, then at some point they're going to seek out that yes. At some point they are. At some point they're going to defy. Um, or they're going to just be so beaten down by that parental figure in their life, always being told no, that they're going to have very, very little confidence in themselves. They're going to be afraid to risk or try new things, to risk new things. Yeah, there's a lot of dangers to that.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I guess to know a little bit more about you, what is a pet peeve that you have in this world?
Um, well, allowing our kids to do whatever they want to do, allowing our
That's a good
kids to do
one.
whatever they want to do, to seek out whatever identity they want, to explore new things without any type of boundary, without any type of boundary to say, to sit them down and say, you know what, this is right and this is wrong. No, it's all right. No, I don't agree with that. Because as a result, we're having an explosion of mental health issues,
Yeah.
like never before, because we're allowing our children to explore on their own, um, without any type of boundaries, without any type of guidance, without anybody
Yeah.
leading them along the way. Um, and that, if you will, that's a pet peeve of mine because I see the results. Many times the results come to live in my home as a foster parent.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that because I think,
Children have to have boundaries. I mean, we all have to have boundaries, right?
yeah.
But children have to have boundaries if they're going to grow up and develop in a healthy fashion
No, I
and to know
absolutely
right and
agree.
wrong and not to end up in jail.
Exactly. It's exactly that because they need to know what where their limits are. It's like, okay, what will I stand for? What will I do? Okay, I am willing to help so and so. I'm willing to go out of my way and make sure that the neighbor's yard is clean or because I'm already cleaning my yard. You know what I mean? Little things like that. Okay, they have that initiative, they have that goal, they have that understanding. But it's that boundaries of like you're not forcing your child to go and clean everyone's yard on for free and you know what I mean? It's just that there's has to be balance. And I think that's the thing that we're seeing now in this world is that people are were either on the one side of the spectrum or the opposite side of the spectrum where they had no freedom, no sense of self, no sense of anything. And then we had the other sense where like everything's free, everything's happy. And then when they become an adult, they're either so against one side or so for the other side. But where's balance? Where's the balance of boundaries? Where's the balance of respect? Where's the morals? Where is that self-understanding? And I don't think a lot of the times these children are developing that because they're seeking the approval of their parents. And if the parents don't necessarily have that groundedness in them, that balance in them, then they're going to be flushed away with wherever the wind blows because they're constantly seeking that. So when you're saying, oh, they're going to seek that acceptance from someone, from somewhere, it's interesting because it seems like what they do is they try to find a community, they try to create their own family. And what is your thoughts on that? Do you think that's a
I think
healthy way?
I think you're 100% correct, and I don't think it's healthy. No. There's the old saying, it starts in the home, and that's so true. That's so
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
Um, you know, will I raise perfect children? Absolutely not. But I'm hoping that I raise children who will respect others, who will care for others, who will have a hard work ethic, who will treat others with kindness and compassion and love. Um, and again, that starts in the home, and it's a day to day to day thing, or it's an hourly thing, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yes, when we let our children do whatever they want that make them feel good, well, I think we're seeing the results.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and how, as a parent, and since you had so many foster children in your home and you've seen the results, how do you necessarily know what work for one child versus another child, since every child is different?
Every child is different. Every child is different. So you need to, again, you need to recognize what their strengths are and what their weaknesses are. You need to spend time with a child to recognize, well, this type of parenting, this type of discipline, if you will, is going to work with one child, but not going to work with this child because
Yeah,
you spend time learning about that child. And that's something that we have to do every time a child comes in our home. We've got to pay attention to their weaknesses and strengths, how they respond to things, and then parent accordingly.
yeah. And
Doesn't
how
mean
do
we're
you
not going
stop?
to. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, no, no. You could go ahead and finish your thought. I
It doesn't
apologize.
mean we're not going to stop parenting. It just means we're going to
Yeah,
continue parenting, but we're going to adapt because,
yeah.
as you said, we're
Adapt.
all different. My
Yes,
wife
yes.
was raised very differently than how I was raised, and I'm very glad that she was because we have been able to bring both of those together in our marriage and in our parenting and in our family.
Yeah, yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate that insight because it's very valid because we, as an adult and as a parent, we never know what's going to work unless we spend that time. You know what I mean? We spend that
Right.
time and then we know exactly because yes, every child is different. You're not going to force a fish to climb up a tree. No, you're going to allow that fish to swim and so it can swim through as fast as it can and you see its
Uh,
greatness through swimming, is through
I like
swimming. So it's
I
like
like that analogy. That's
yeah, so
great.
it's like we really do, as adults, we really have to think about this in a whole new way and how we deal with these children out in this world. And I think, like you said earlier, about having that affirmation, the guidance, the boundaries, the love, that self-respect. I mean, having those morals all combined in and is so crucial just for the next generation because one day we will be gone. And once we are gone, we will leave the world to that generation. And what will happen to that generation? What will happen to the world? We don't know. But obviously we do because we see it unfolding now in front of our eyes. You know what I mean? And I think it makes it real for the adults who have balance, the adults that have that sense of understanding because we are seeing it all play out in front of us. And it
You
sucks
know,
to
here,
know. Go
and
ahead.
I'm gonna build on that. And you asked me what one of my pet peeves is. Here's another one: accountability. We don't teach our children to be accountable for their actions today either. So they
Absolutely. We
think they,
don't.
they think they can do whatever they want and not be held accountable. So that can be very detrimental in their school. That can
Yeah,
be very detrimental in their workplace because when they do get a job and they learn, what do you mean I can't do whatever I want? What do you mean I got to come in at a certain time? What do you mean I have to have a uniform? What do you mean I'm late for work? And it can be accountable in society. What do you mean I can't burn this thing down? What do you mean I can't loot and riot? What do you mean I can't do this and that? Because they've not been
exactly.
taught accountability or respect for their fellow human being.
Exactly. And people don't realize that every action has a consequences. There's this tie. So you can't say something, you can't do something, you can't literally do anything without something being tied to it. If it's a good thing or if it's a bad thing, whatever it is, it's tied to it. And it comes down to that accountability and honorability. We have to honor what we've done, no matter what it is. We have to own up to it. We have to acknowledge the fact that, yes, I messed up but I learned from it. And I think not a lot of people are learning from their actions. And we see people going to school and they don't know what they're doing. They need their parent with them, or they go into a job interview and have their parent there to do the job interview.
Right.
Like I literally walked into Burger King just to go to the bathroom and was waiting for my food. And I seen a father there with his daughter. And I was just like, why are you here? And even the manager was like, are you going to work with her? And he was like, no, this is for her. Okay, well then bye. Like we need to have this concept that people are just missing. And it sucks that time is catching up to us. So what can be some lasting words that you can leave us off with to keep on thinking?
Well, I think parenting to me is it's been at times the hardest thing I've done, Times also been the most rewarding thing I've done. Every
Mm.
child that's come into my home has made me a better husband, better father figure, a better member of society, a better person in general. And I've learned to love so much more by spending time with all of these children. So many people don't spend enough time with their children and they regret it, of course, later on. As a parent, we have a gift, and it's a gift for a short time. And if we
Yeah.
don't value that gift, then that gift's going to be taken from us.
Yes. 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 Oh my goodness. Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, oh, we need to really think about this. We need to put this into consideration into our heart and really realize where are you? What type of parent are you? What type of adult are you? Are you balanced or are you not? Are you still learning yourself? Are you putting this responsibility on your child to tell you what you are? I mean, these are the things that we have to think about as an adult because it does affect our children later on in life. So please think about this. You know what I mean? Think about this. And if you want to know more about Dr. John, because how could you not after this conversation, right? Go check him out. I have a link to his websites, have great content, great information so that you can continue on thinking. And obviously, you can find it on, if you listen on the audio, go under the descriptions, boop, click it right there. If you're on YouTube, just under the descriptions, boop, right there. Or if you're on the website, just click on his photo and it goes directly to his website so that you don't miss anything out and so that obviously you can continue on thinking. So, with that being said, bye.